and then a $3,000 gain in year 3 to again level out the accretion in that value of that bond. So all of this gives rise to the concept of yield to maturity. The prices, premiums, or discounts, and so forth gets us to the value of the bond, and now we have to use that value to calculate something that we call yield to maturity. This is not only the best, but it's really the only proper way for determining the fairness of the price of the bond that you're buying. It's a mathematical equation, so makes some people's eyes glaze over, but we'll try to work through this and give you the sense of what it entails. First of all, let's review what happens with the actual cash flow on an investment like this. So let's say we're going to pay $103,000 to acquire this $100,000 bond, paying 2% per year. What is our cash flow on that situation? Well, we receive interest payments, but those interest payments are $2,000 per year, or $1,000 every 6 months. We get the $1,000 on August 28th and $1,000 on February 28th. So the interest payments that we receive are not affected at all by what we've actually paid for the bond. If we pay 103, if we pay 110, if we pay 90, none of that is going to change what we're going to get in interest. Our interest is going to be the coupon rate multiplied by the face value of the bond, or 2% times the 100,000, or it's going to be $2,000 per year. How much do you receive when this bond matures? Well, the answer, as we've discussed before, is just $100,000. So you paid $103,000 for it, but you're only going to get $100,000 at maturity. So the $3,000 premium that you paid is lost. So, in summary, you've invested $103,000 in order to receive $2,000 per year in interest, and then $100,000 in cash at maturity. So the yield to maturity is the mathematical calculation, assuming your investment amount's $103,000, you're going to receive the $2,000 per month in interest, and then you receive $100,000 or book a $3,000 loss on this investment at the time that it matures. Yield to maturity takes into account all those factors and says, all right, what really is the yield that we're getting on this $103,000 investment, assuming the $2,000 per year, not per month, and then the $3,000 loss at maturity. So the question is the yield to maturity, taking these into account, going to be higher or lower than the bond's 2% coupon rate? And the answer is it's going to be lower. We're investing more than $100,000 to get 2%, so it stands to reason that the yield would end up being lower on that $103,000 than it would be on $100,000. And that's the reason that you had to pay a premium to buy this bond, was that the interest rates had fallen down to 1%, so our yield to maturity is going to be lower than the 2%. The important concept here is that the yield to maturity is going to be similar and reflective of the general interest rates for all instruments of similar quality and maturity. So if market rates are 1% and you're selling a 2% bond, the price on that bond is going to be such that when you run this yield to maturity calculation, the yield to maturity is going to be about the market rate of 1%, assuming we're dealing with instruments of similar quality and similar maturity. Another example, assume we paid $91,000 to acquire this $100,000 bond. Now the question would be, will our yield to maturity be higher or lower than the bond's 2% rate. Hopefully you can understand that the answer to this is higher. If we're earning 2% on 100,000, that percentage is going to be a lot higher when we've only invested 91,000 to get that $2,000 per year in interest. So you get the $2,000 per year in interest on that 91,000, and then the extra 9,000 at maturity, and so the yield is going to be higher. But that's because the reason you're buying it is that the rates were higher than the 2% rate that the bond is paying. So again, the reason that the discount comes into play is that on other investments in the marketplace you could get 5%. So the value of this bond drops enough so that you can buy it and get a yield to maturity of approximately 5%. Now I got this question to illustrate yield to maturity in a different way. Which of these bonds offers a higher yield to maturity? So we have bond 1 that has a $100,000 face value, comes due February 28th of 2017, so this is 4 years, and it pays 5% interest, and you pay $100,000 for this bond. So $100,000 4-year investment at 5%. Or bond 2, $100,000 face value bond, you only pay $90,000 to acquire this bond, but it only pays 2.5% interest, comes due the same time. Which of these bonds offers a higher yield to maturity? Think about that one for a minute. And the answer is neither. Actually, the yield to maturities of both are essentially the same. And the reason for that is, take a look here at the cash flow of this. So bond 1, you paid $100,000 for that bond. You get $5,000 each year in interest, and then you get $100,000 back at the end. So your total interest received is $20,000. There's no gain on your original investment because you're getting back exactly what you paid. So your total return on that investment is $20,000. Over here on bond 2, we only paid $90,000 for that bond. We only got $2,500 per year in interest. That's 2.5% on that $100,000. So we only got $10,000 worth of interest. But we made an extra $10,000 on that bond because we put $90,000 into it and we got $100,000 back. So when we add the interest to the gain on our original investment, we got $20,000. We made $20,000 on both investments. So essentially, their yield to maturity is the same. So you can see here that the pricing adjusted to reflect the interest rate on the bond that the bond is paying can get you to the same, can have bonds that provide the same yields regardless of the price that you paid. So now let's look at this $100,000 2% coupon bond one more time. And we looked before at the fact that if you paid $103,000 to acquire this bond, that the yield to maturity would be lower than 2%, which was true. All right. Now the question is, if you paid $104,000 to acquire that bond instead of the $103,000, would your yield to maturity be higher or lower? And of course the answer there is that it would be lower because you're paying even more to get the same stream of payments, and so that